Welcome back to Side Chat with Crouching Walrus and Bohica Ice. This week we're going to discuss damage models with CobeyWobey.
Hola.
I invited you back this week because I know that's something that you usually rage quit and scream that this is something that's not right, More Thunder.
Absolutely. It's probably my biggest frustration in the game, believe it or not. Besides the fact that the airplanes aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, is the damage is just unacceptable. Just purely unacceptable.
We'll get to that in a bit. Originally when I wanted to do this, I thought it would be something that, it wasn't even in my top 10 things necessarily wrong with War Thunder, and then after several hours of testing on custom battles, I'm more baffled than ever. I can't figure out what the problem is, and there's several things that can relate to it. I used to not oppose. Well, I used to oppose. Your opinion is that the aircrafts are too weak and soft, and I thought they were okay, but first we'll get to that in a minute. So I've read through a lot of old forum posts, aircraft diagrams, even watched World War II kill cams, and I don't have any conclusion here. But as Walrus and I are kind of finding out, one reason that it looks like planes are taking damage in the game is because the hits aren't registering. And then when you're in game, you see sparkles across the airplane. What that means is it's a client-side hit detection and not necessarily a server-side hit detection. So what you're seeing is you're striking the person, but the server or the other player will never know it. It's just you, and that's why people get frustrated, and that's why we call it Sparkle Thunder, at least around here.
So why is there even a client-side damage result in the first place? Shouldn't it just be all on the server side?
Because the game would look weird, and I guess I can give a real nerdy, quick explanation. Whenever you browse the internet, it's going to be, you use protocol called TCP, which is a very good checks and balances system that makes sure that all data is sent is 100% back and forth, right? When you do a multiplayer game, it uses something called UDP, which has no checks and balances, so what gets sent, and no matter how it gets received, gets received. So if it's corrupted or it fails, it will never reach the server or back to the other clients. So what that means is that you'll have, when you send a volley of rounds and you have 30% pocket loss, 70% of them will connect, right?
Okay.
But if it looked weird if you fired, if let's say 70% of your rounds actually fired out of your gun or whatnot, it would just look weird. So there's a client side animation and then there's a server side hit registration. So
Makes
there's
sense.
it's all multiplayer games are built on the UDP. It's not necessarily something that is War Thunder's fault, but the problem is, I think, is that we're running on servers and God knows where, Moscow, US servers, which I don't know exactly where they're sitting, European servers, and so for us US players, we're sending our stuff through our local modem to our ISP router to sometimes New York or Baltimore, across the freaking Atlantic Ocean to England to France to etc. So that packet is hitting a lot of international hops and they get lost.
Let's talk about the U.S. server for a second, because I live in California, and I consistently am pinging 97 to 99 on the U.S. servers, which leads me to believe that it's about as far away from me as you can get.
I get a ping of 45 in Florida,
so it's got to be somewhere in the Northeast. Then it's probably going to be like New York, maybe.
Yeah, it's for any other.
I get about 40 to 60 in Louisiana.
And for like a first-person shooter like Battlefield will say, you should never play on a server that you have a ping over 65.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's server lag, and so you don't see as much in a World War II game with airplanes. But anything above 100 is atrocious to play on. So when you see a ping like my Moscow ping's like 190, awesome, and that's where the packets are failing and you're not getting
287.
hit registration.
Yeah, I consistently when we play on European servers, my ping is consistently above 150. It's between 150 and 200 every single time, regardless.
So, so this whole, why we're taking this moment to talk about this is where a lot of the damage model problems are coming into play, is because of the packet loss that some people are getting really bad. Some people, it doesn't affect me as much. I know a bunch of guys in here who have, packet loss all the time.
Put me into the dirt twice just yesterday.
But to tell if you are hitting somebody, there is a feature though in the game that most people do not know about. Whenever you shoot and you see that X pop up on your crosshairs, have you guys ever seen that, where you shoot somebody and then that is an actual server hit registered? That's the way of the server telling you that you did connect on that hit. So you can't rely on the visual sparkles. You have to rely on that, that blinking X in your crosshairs, which tells you that your hits are actually registering on that plane or target.
I think though sometimes it has to do with lag again, but sometimes you'll see a sparkle and not an immediate hit marker, but it actually did register. It's taken a while to tell you that it hit. I've had that in the past where I hit someone, I thought it was just a sparkle, it didn't actually register. And as I'm flying, I'm not shooting at him, and then I just get a random hit marker.
I've seen that before as well.
So it just has to do. It's all with lag.
They then put up more. Well, the game, I don't know. They don't pay me, so I actually have a degree in this shit, and I'm not going to do this for free for them. So if they want to pay me to analyze their network, I will. But I don't know. They either need to put more servers, they need to have better servers, or they need to localize and lock in players to regions, because I've never played any other online game where I've actually had to connect to European or Russian servers to play. And I understand there's off-peak times, there's peak times, and blah blah blah. But they really need to try to lock in Matchmaker to local regions first before pushing you to Russia and Europe.
Even if you get over-tiered or under-tiered, it's probably going to be better to play with someone that's a hell of a lot closer than fucking Moscow.
And I'm not even saying like when I say local region, not just the U.S. I'm talking about Southeast, Central U.S., Western. Russia's huge. I'm sure they probably have the same problem we're talking about if you live in the Urals and you're connecting to I don't know
because they
Moscow.
have decent internet there. You have shitty internet here.
All right, let's talk about airplanes though before we.
Let's talk about airplanes.
Completely nerds, yeah.
Airplanes.
The main thing, and I have a bunch of footage running while we're talking about different planes. The number one thing I've noticed, the first disturbing thing I've noticed in my notes here, is that the 50 cal APITs and the 303 APITs catch everything on fire, no matter if it's a freaking biplane, A6M2, P-47 Corsair, Bearcats, TA-152s. It doesn't matter. One hit from an APIT into the fuel tank or engine seems to get 100% ignition on a good server. Now, Cobey and I watched a lot of World War II footage one night of 109s and TA. Well, I think there was a TA-152 and some other planes that were struck.
Oh, yeah,
and you see the 50 cals kind of tearing through the the wings and whatnot, and you would see a huge amount of fuel being dumped, and then maybe the APIT would ignite the fuel that is mixing in the air. With self-sealing fuel tanks and some of the later planes, I don't think it's possible or unlikely for fuel tanks to just randomly explode like they are in the game.
Unless they were hit with an exploding shell and it happened to be empty enough to where the vapor ignited.
And I guess real quickly about fuel tanks, later airplanes, fuel tanks, they were, was it rubber was that made out of? Like rubber bags, essentially?
Foam.
Yeah.
That would compress down to push the air out as it, these planes were meant for safety, and it's not like they were
for survival, not for safety.
Well, okay, survival. But they weren't flying around in like flying bombs like some of these planes are in the game.
No, actually, the only airplane that really was like that is the most indestructible airplane in the game. That's the fucking Zero. that has midget fire extinguishers in it everywhere. That thing should burn like a matchstick.
Same thing with the Bettys.
That's what it did in real life.
Same thing with the G4M1s. Those things were notorious for burning.
Yeah, the Bettys. Those were notorious for being easy to shoot down, and in game they're kind of tanky.
So, I guess we'll start from the inside of the plane. Pilot snipes. I have noticed. Was it 2 months ago? I don't have the exact date here. They put in a new pilot snipe system where they cut down the pilot profile by, I forgot, was it 30-40%. Instead of being like a square character sitting in the cockpit, they counted, they made it like a triangle, so at least that, the head is this big and the body is this big and so on, trying to cut down the pilot hitbox. I've got so many pilot snipes in the test server from 303s and 50 cals going through steel armor and steel glass that they should not be able to.
And I've actually said it in the last podcast, I think, as well, that the only way to really guarantee yourself a pilot kill is to basically attack from the top through the canopy. All fighters and most other airplanes had armor surrounding the crew areas that was, especially with light machine guns, with 50 cals and 303s and 30-06s and the 7.5 Jap and the 7.62 by 54 Russian and the Mauser guns that it's impossible to penetrate through the armor.
Yeah, and I'm getting pilot snipes through the P-47 back armor with a freaking Hurricane. And I don't, I don't think that's ever right, and that's something that needs to be.
Like I said, the only way to really guarantee yourself a pilot kill that incapacitates the pilot is to basically attack from the top down directly through the canopy.
Unless it's 20 millimeter, 30 millimeter should get through that plate. But if a 20 millimeter strikes your plane, 3 millimeter strikes the back of your fuselage, you're in bigger problems anyway.
Yeah.
I'll clarify that when you say test server, that's
custom server. Yeah. I call it test server because I lived in it this week. So, my big gripe right now, what I'm seeing is wing and control surface damage. I do not like how Gaijin built this from the ground up. I know it's too late probably for them to go back and redo it. And this has to get with how they do the damage models and how if I was leading the development, I would do it, in the dream world. Essentially, I pretty much believe that the entire wing is one hitbox, except for the ailerons and flaps. And you strike it here with, X amount of damage as a hitbox, and the wing's either going to go pink, red, black, or just cut clean off. And Cobey knows a lot more about this than I do, but there's a lot more to a wing than just, one. It's not a piece of plywood hanging off the aircraft. It has, structures inside of it. Was it skinned and so on? So you actually have to hit a vital part of a wing to actually inflict structural damage to an aircraft's flightability. I mean, a hole, is this right? I mean, I could be wrong, but putting holes in a wing won't bring it down.
That's correct, yeah. I mean, there's nothing, unless you hit the inside structure of the wing, the wing is just two pieces of sheet metal. It's basically hollow on the inside, except for the ribs and, other stuff like hydraulic lines and control lines and shit like that. But, I mean, absolutely nothing like what's in the game now is real life. I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's what I'm trying to explain here is that the hitboxes, let's say like, I don't know, a 10 to 15 wide thing by, 8 feet wide, it's huge. It's a huge hitbox for the wings, which is why most planes in the game seem to get taken down is because of wing damage. In reality, what did you say? Like 60% of the wing is filled with maybe important shit, and then 40% is this empty space that rounds would just pass straight through.
I'd actually say probably the opposite. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the airplane, but certainly the farther out on the wing you go from the fuselage, the less stuff there is inside of it until you get to the wingtip.
Right, inside the wing, most airplanes on the inside of the wing have stuff like hydraulic lines, fuel cells,
where the landing gear is, where the fuel bags might be. Yeah, there's structure inside there, but it's mostly just hollow stuff. From once you get outside of the gun bays, it's mostly just a hollow wing.
And I would just like to, but this is my thing, like I said, like if they modeled the damage models for these planes one by one instead of pushing out these planes and, roughly drawn, schematics for damage models, they should have literally had a damage modeler go through and put these beams in, put these guns in, put the landing gear in, and not just put blocky hitboxes inside of it. Because it changes how these planes' durability is by absolutely. It's just going to be, I don't know, it's going to be hard to adjust a whole wing to take damage when the wing was a very complex mechanical thing.
That's my biggest frustration with the game is that I think a lot of things on these airplanes by Gaijin has just been assumed and just taken care of, and it's not gone back and fact checked, or there's been no resolution.
The other thing,
example is the P-47. I mean, that thing's so freaking fragile. It's just ridiculous.
Well, the testing we saw is that there's 3 parts of it that are fragile, which are baffling. The wings and the fuselage are okay. Anything on the underneath part or in the elevator and the tail, it's like glass. It's very baffling. It's just like you strike it with anything and it just
the engine
shatters off. Yeah, the engine. Fragile, and the engines we were taking down with 303s, no problem.
Yeah,
blowing oil everywhere. Yeah. We'll get to that in a minute. And then the pilot snipes for the P-47. It's just planes that are historically tough, that are some of the weakest in the game. But we'll get to that in a few.
I've seen a few P-47s being shot down by German gun cams, and I've never seen anything close to a P-47's tail just falling off.
Just shearing completely off. Yeah.
The other thing
happened. I mean, I'm sure it did happen, but
not with the slight volume of fire that it takes in this game.
Yeah, I would agree.
Alright, so the other thing I was going to bring up is control surface damages, which I'm not currently happy with in the game. And right now it's a visual damage model. Like, it's like the elevator's half hit, like it's pink, red, black, and then there's different visual damage models that go on top of it. But it seems to be like if your elevator's pink or red, it still works. If it's black, it's dead. Like you can still fly a plane, and same thing with the ailerons and the flaps and so on, and the rudder. I would like to see different degrees of damage, because if a bullet hit the top of your rudder, you still have half a rudder. You still should have, I guess, call it half controllability with your rudder. Same thing with the ailerons. Ailerons, unless they snap clean off, or the hydraulic lines are cut or something, they should still have, you know what I mean, the I guess it'd be degraded controllability and not just, oh, you don't have that anymore.
Not just no controllability. Yeah.
So you have different degrees of damage. I understand when I say this, I'm talking about 303s and 50 cal strikes. If a 20 millimeter hits an aileron, it's probably going to be gone. But I'm talking about, degrees of damage, not just a random Chika round hitting a buffalo and then the aileron flying off. It's
Remember,
bizarre.
a lot of the ailerons on airplanes during World War II were fabric covered, so bullets would just go right through it. They just make a little hole right through the freaking aileron. And unless the thing was blown off, or unless the bullet hit the inside structure and exploded and blew the aileron to pieces, it wouldn't really do anything at all. It would continue as it was normally flying.
So, and I wish I could talk about like certain airplanes, for example, but there's so many. We found so much broken stuff. It's almost like damaged models need to be redesigned from the ground up. And what's really funny is I was reading through old forum posts, and I found messages from the devs from like last February saying, "Oh, these flight models and damage models are just kind of placeholders. We'll address this before new content comes out." But like so many broken promises about this stuff, and I haven't really seen much in the way of damage models. Oh no, Walrus follows this a little bit more than I do. Have you seen much in damage model updates and since 1.29 or 1.31?
I'm more of a flight model person. I don't really follow any. I don't think they've done many updates with damage models since like they did one big one, and I'm not sure if they ever reverted it. I think it was back in 1.31 or something like that. But yeah, I mainly just follow flight models. I don't think they've done anything since at
The
least
only
since
one I know is the
1.31.
pilot one. All right.
Yeah.
So real quick, let's talk about ammo. There was a surprising. I knew stock belts and upgraded belts. There was a difference. I had no clue from a custom battle that it was this big. And what I mean by this is that we would strike a B-17G, which is supposed to be one of the tankiest planes in the game, with stock D13 door 13 belts, and then strike it with air target belts. It would be the difference between 5 to 10 hits and thousands. It is bizarre how much difference there is between belts.
What do you mean 5 to 10 hits and thousands? Like, in the 5 to 10 hits, 5 to 10 hits were connecting, and then if you put the air target belt
no damage, no damage with 5 to 10 hits on stock belts. You switch to air targets, wing tips are blowing off, wing roots are blowing off, tail controls, tails blowing off, everything. Like,
yeah,
it is like throwing rocks and throwing grenades. I don't understand it.
I think the devs intentionally make the default belts weaker, much weaker, so that you have to grind a little bit more, play a little bit more.
Spend your golden eagles, comrade.
So I thought I'd share that. That's one thing we did test in our time, and it's a massive difference than I had ever believed. So now my thing is go for stock belts as soon as you can when you're upgrading a plane, because it's just bullshit.
Go for not stock
Go for
belts.
it. Yeah, I was just saying.
I'm sorry.
Go for the upgraded belts.
Go
Anything
me.
besides.
Maybe that's what I'm doing wrong. Damn it.
You and I ran that thing the other day with Chris where we were doing that testing, and I had tracers on, and the tracers were shit. Then I changed it to
Universal.
Omnipurpose.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a lot better. I think I'm just going to leave Omnipurpose on everything now.
Yeah, but spoilers, the 30mm works. It's just lag.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. The broken planes that I was doing testing with Chris too earlier this week, and it's very bizarre, and I'll show this footage. I love this footage of a P-400 going head-on for Hurricane, getting struck in the engine, and then wings, elevators, fuselage, tails, like parts, like a garage sale going on of just P-400 parts flying everywhere. It's like the thing, you hit the engine, and it's filled with nitroglycerin, and it explodes into a million pieces, and you can't really judge that to judge all damage models. But how the hell does this get through testing?
What testing?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's your answer.
Testers.
And I have to gripe about this, and we'll be on this plane for a little bit. The P-38, once again, fucking baffles me. You hit that thing with Chika bullets. We tried this with little I-15, Russian incendiaries, which, whatever. Everything catches on fire. Parts of the plane that don't have fuel or anything in it, hollow structures with metal. Somehow the Chaika can burn aluminum. I'm not sure how they, Russia figured that one out, but the P-38 will catch on fire, and then this will catch on fire, and then this part will catch on fire, which it's all metal plane, but somehow the fire is jumping around the P-38. And my favorite thing is you'll see the fire jump from the left wing onto the fucking right wing somehow.
And it never stops burning.
Yeah, and it was one of the safest planes that Lockheed made. Like, they tested everything on this thing. This is,
the leading edge of the wings, they also go up in fires as if they had fuel tanks there, which the G model did not. And
only the J and the L did. That's correct. And actually, those are, besides the drop tanks, I believe actually those were the first tanks that were burned down.
They would be empty by the time they got to combat.
Oh, yeah, and they weren't very big. I think they were only like 60-something gallons apiece, 76 gallons maybe. They weren't very, very big at all. That's where the intercoolers used to be.
We addressed the P-47 till the R-2800s. Let's say all radials, right? The Doras, the TA-152, the P-47, the Corsair, that Bearcat. I don't know, I haven't much experience with Bearcat in that regard, but Lavochkins, all radials.
I don't know much about. I haven't seen many German gun cams shooting down Russian planes, but all I know is the M82 engine for Russia, the ones that are in the LA series, and the I-185. Those tend to blow up really explosively and catch fire extremely easily. I'd assume they'd be a little bit tougher than they are, but maybe not. But I don't know.
I've never seen, in all my years on this earth, driving down the highway, a car gets into a crash and the engine just explode into a fireball, and then everybody inside was vaporized. I've never seen that. Of course, cars
all the time in Hollywood.
Well, actually, Kobe, you shoot a lot. How many times have you seen rednecks or good old boys push an old Cadillac into the woods and unload millions of rounds into it?
Well, I could tell you from personal experience that it basically takes a tank shell to blow up a car when you're shooting at it.
Yeah, bullets are so greatly exaggerated in this game, especially with engines. Engines are hard steel blocks that don't,
aluminum, yeah.
Yeah, they don't want
to. They're really dense. There's a lot of density there, and it's just not modeled correctly.
Yeah,
and I think it's all a damage model because actually the Dora, the D13, the D9, they have inline engines.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, it's a circular radiator, like what's on the Junkers 88, same thing. But it's just ridiculously fragile.
The TA-152, swear to God, Spit Mark 9, premium, 303, bottom of my TA-152, 5 rotations of the prop, dead. I'm just sitting there going, well, sweet, nice knowing you.
That is an inline engine as well. It's the same engine that's in the doors.
Would a 303 take down an engine that fast?
Yeah, it could if it hit coolant.
5.
No, it would
fast.
Still run. It would run until it just overheated.
It should overheat. The problem damage model is that it goes red, black, dead. Like it should go temperature, and at least allow you a chance in hell at getting back to the airfield instead of
instantly dying. Yeah.
Instantly dying. I think the whole
run out of coolant in that time. I don't think.
The whole engines need to be. For all planes, need to be revisited, I think. The other problem I have with most engines is that, and I understand like on bombers, I've seen plenty of bomber footage of engines catching on fire. Not necessarily exploding, but I don't see a lot of footage of fighters' engines necessarily catching on fire because other problems, like usually other things happen before that. I don't know. Is there a reason for that, Kobe, or is it just old war footage?
I think it's just kind of the angle that they're being shot at, mostly. Aviation gasoline, which is what powered all these things, is pretty flammable, but it's not nearly as bad as what's in the game. And the game is just extremely over-exaggerated.
Yeah. And then one thing, I have it in my notes here, the Corsair. This is a plane I wanted to bring up. The wings on it it's one of those planes, and there's others like it. It gets struck by anything, and it just goes black, and then you're completely unflyable. Like the plane will just list over, and then you'll fall out of the sky eventually and die. Corsairs were once again, I guess, one of those planes that had a lot of survivability things, we'll call it, put into it. You have any stories or anything offhand about Corsairs being shot at by Zeros, taking, wing damage or anything to add?
Well, I can tell you for Chance Vought built the Corsair. They built a pretty stout airplane. It's a pretty tough airplane. It's in real life, they would absorb enormous amounts of damage and still fly back home. and not just have a wing fall off, and that was that. I don't know where Gaijin's getting this. I think part of the reason is, especially with the fires, is because the fire is so pretty in the game that I think they're kind of over exaggerating it to give everyone some sort of visual whatever
cinematic feel, kind of like
Yes,
the jets
exactly.
the jets that all have afterburners.
Yes, yeah, that's a great example. None of the airplanes had afterburners, but in reality, if you're flying your freaking F9F Panther and there's that much fire in the tailpipe, you better be looking for a place to land because that thing's gonna burn up. There's something wrong.
Yeah, and the other thing, like when we're watching our kill cams the other night, when we saw fuel tanks, catch on fire, it was like a hot flame that lasted maybe 5 or 6 feet off the wing. It was a hot, intense flame. Yeah, vapor.
That's the vapor from the fuel.
Well, I know, but there was some. Well, we keep debating about this because it's black and white, but I think there was some flame in there too.
Yeah, I'm sure there probably was.
Catching
Yeah,
the
well,
vapor.
it is. Yeah.
It's not this like 200-yard,
No, it's not. No.
fireball going across the sky. And I've caught so much grief because people are like, oh, you love the new fire in this patch, 1.37. I'm like, it kind of looks cheap.
It's pretty. It's very.
I don't even think
it's
that good of animation. I don't think it's that good of animation. I'd rather see short, hot flames, like more color. Because the thing is, they said that another broken promise, that as the fire got hotter, the color of the flame would change. But all I see is the same generic fireball animation looped coming out of the same spot.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion. But I don't like the new fire. I'll say that. And then there's a plane that you bitched and moaned a lot about. I put in here, the Wellington.
The Jelly Welly, yeah, the probably most indestructible airplane during the entire war. It was all fabric covered. It was incredibly, incredibly strong due to the structure that it was designed around. It was designed around a geodetic structure. In fact, you can see it in some of the like the side gunner windows and stuff like that. It's that kind of crisscross X-shaped stuff. It was an extremely, extremely strong structure, and the Wellington just falls apart in this game for no reason. I don't know why it does that.
It's either pilot snipes or elevators in that stupid thing. Like it's.
Or your tail section and both wings blow off all at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
50 cal shred, like P-47s shred that plane like it's a chew choy. All baffling. And then I really quick one to add in here because a viewer requested us to do some Japanese testing, and we did that before we actually jumped on this podcast. I wish I could tell you that, like, some people complain about the ME-410. The ME-410 felt like somewhat solid flight model compared to others. I wish I could say that all twin engine planes or all multiple engine planes are overperforming the damage model. And then you go fly a Japanese heavy fighter and the thing feels like it's built out of fiberglass.
KF-45 is a good example of that.
Yeah, KF-45, the thing just tears to pieces. But then the Beaufighter, of course, bring that up, flies around like it can fly through concrete walls.
And the thing about the KF-45 is, everyone's under the misconception that every single Japanese plane was just it was made of napkins and it was just they were covered in
I would say that before, it's made of napkins. That's awesome.
But that's essentially what they think. They think that every single Japanese plane should be the most fragile thing ever, should go up in flames instantly. It's a misconception just from the Zero, because that's their most produced fighter in the war, and that's their most famous fighter, and it's famous for going up in flames. So they just assume that every Japanese plane's like that. But to my knowledge, the KF-45 had 2 radial engines. It was built out of pretty much the same material as most other fighters and stuff at the time. It had maybe not self-sealing fuel tanks, but a bunch of Japanese fighters did have self-sealing fuel tanks. It just wasn't the Zero. And it seems like it's the blanket Zero model for the damage model on every single Japanese plane, and they just go over that.
Except for the bombers. The bombers are a whole fucking class themselves there.
Oh yeah, the bombers are pretty tanky.
So we did some testing on the B-17s. B-17E actually did not feel as tanky as I thought it would be in a custom battle. It actually seemed to want to perform like an aircraft, but the B-17G is the mythical animal that either the wingtip snaps off, the tail snaps off, or it can eat 2,000 rounds, lose every control surface, catch on fire 6 times, and then just casually, glide across the sky like a majestic unicorn or something. I don't know that plane. What the hell?
And I save you with my P-51.
Cadillac of the sky.
I don't know. The biggest problem with the B-17s and the other heavy bombers is they need to, and this is one thing I'll say too real quick. The damage models and the custom battles actually were okay. We're dealing with some type of weird hit registration issue with the B-17Gs, the Lancasters, Blenheim, Beauforts, Havocs, etc., etc. All these planes, for some reason, are not hit registering, it seems like, in the live servers. The damage models feel okay in custom battles, so I don't know if it's certain cannons that aren't registering, or I don't know. That's something that guys you need to spend some time investigating.
One more thing about the B-17 is when you have a control surface or something that's black, I would assume that means it's completely devastated and destroyed.
And or missing, yeah.
Yeah, and are missing. And if you want to see a clip of this, just watch Pika's latest B-17 montage. But he's flying the plane with everything black, literally everything black, and he's climbing. And I'm not sure how that works. It's just with no engines, no ailerons, no elevator.
I
no
cut the
rudder,
footage
no...
out of the video, but I flew all the way back to about 100 meters from an airfield. I was on the opposite side of the map, past the enemy airfield, and I made it 100 meters from our airfield before I crashed.
At that point,
probably another 20-30 minutes I was airborne with nothing.
Yeah, at that point I would assume the plane would just be falling out of the sky. It has nothing.
But they need to make, I mean, this is a problem. I think it's a hit registration issue right now. If they ever get that fixed, then we're going to hit the bombers need a buff, the bombers need a buff. I don't think the bombers actually got a buff. I think that the servers are so shit that we all thought they got a buff. That's my new theory, but I could be wrong. I tried testing, I couldn't figure it out. The Lancaster is a mythical beast that doesn't need control surfaces and a bunch of other crap it needs. Blenheims and Beaufort's fella, right? Yeah, the Lancaster needs a flight model like hell. I know exactly what you're going to say.
Yep.
The problem I found with the Blenheim, the Beaufort, the SBM2, the Havocs, the Boston, all this stuff I put in my notes, it has a little bit more tanky damage model because it's a twin-engine plane or whatnot. But it's the caliber of weapons it meets at its tiers that I think is part of the problem, because you'll meet a couple lags with cannons. You won't find any German stuff. Well, the Heinkel 112s. Very few planes have cannons in those tiers those planes roll. And then you have, 303s and maybe a couple 50 cals trying to bring down planes that could play in Tier 3 and Tier 4 if they're damage models. And I think that's more of a balancing issue than a damage model issue. I don't know if you...
agree with that. I would agree with that wholeheartedly, I think.
Yeah, Wellington's a really early plane too. A lot of people argue it should be Tier 1, and that brings up the balancing issues. They couldn't really put that at Tier 1, because then you'd have Heinkel 51s trying to bring down a Wellington. And if it had a proper damage model, that'd be pretty bad. Probably right now, even Heinkel 51s could take it down, but...
So, like I said, I hate kind of sitting here and bashing a company that we, don't work for here almost every week, it seems like, but I really kind of went to this week trying to look for some positives and try to see where, oh, I like this plane and I wish, they would build off of it. And there's only a few damage models I actually kind of liked. One of them was the Kitty Hawk seemed okay. Most of the P-47 was okay besides the tail and the engine. What am I missing? M1Ks actually seemed like a decent damage model for the most part. KI-61s are a damage model that I don't have a problem with. But there's so much just shit that I don't even know where to even go, or even where to recommend going.
I don't know if they've updated it, but this is just my experience flying it and flying against it in real games. The M1K seems to occasionally explode and losing its wing, both wings and the tail. Whenever, it doesn't matter what you hit it with, if you hit it in the right spot, it seems to just have some sort of thermonuclear reactor in the middle of the plane somewhere that you can hit, blow up the entire airplane.
Yeah, I don't understand that's what just frustrates me. For my testing, I found about 30 planes that do that. Great plane that was added in the patch, 190A-8, fucking has a damage model of the P400, which I did not believe somebody telling me, and then I tested it, and holy crap. I'll never fly that in a game, ever, because it gets hit by a rock in the windshield and the tail will fall off.
Yeah, I've never seen a plane explode like that in real life. Everything just blows up at once. Unless it has a bomb in it and you hit the bomb bay, maybe that would happen. But a fighter, I've never seen that happen.
So one last thing I wanted to bring up, while I remember before we wrap this up, laminar wings for late. Well, I guess let's say if you want to do this, Kobe, explain to listeners what the difference is between the Buffalo and the Bearcat. We'll use two, U.S. planes for this.
Bearcat didn't have
What?
laminar.
Well,
Even
yeah,
the
but I mean,
Mustang did.
well, but what's the difference in design for survivability, for armor?
No difference. There's no difference. Laminar flowing is more efficient for flying because of less frontal area. That's the only difference. It's more efficient aerodynamically.
What I'm referring to is like survivability for armor on the aircraft and design and whatnot. Like you take a Buffalo to a Bearcat.
Yeah, well, that's a good example. Buffalo to a Bearcat. Buffalo first flew in 1937 maybe, and the Bearcat was in 1945, I think.
Right. So what design?
We learned a lot between 1937 and 1945. We actually studied a lot of what happened in the Battle of Britain. The British were really good at capturing data and writing stuff down, and we used a lot of that. They shared a lot of that with us, and then so on and so forth. We traded with what we learned from fighting the Japanese with them as well. And it's just experience. There was a huge technological jump between the late 30s and the end of the war. That's really all that is.
Still the same basic concept though for protection. It's just I think even the Buffalo had self-sealing fuel tanks and an armor plate in the back.
Yep.
So
but then things like layered plexiglass for the front for some plane, the front glass armor, right?
Some of them didn't even have it. Buffalo didn't have armor glass at all.
Right, but I'm saying as time went on, they added stuff like that.
On it, for Christ's sake.
Was the Bearcat, Corsair, some of those had fire extinguishers in the wings, or like some type of foam? I don't know, my element here, but I thought I remember hearing about somewhere that they had.
I don't think so. I think the only airplane that did was maybe the late model P-47s. I don't think they had any kind of fire suppression system.
Late model A6M5s had it. The A6M5B or the Otsu as you see it in game. That one had fire extinguishers or an early rudimentary fire extinguishing system that kind of worked.
I just like these planes that are supposed to have these type of features in them to have it in the damage models. That's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, well, you can add that to a long list of shit that I would like to have fixed the game, like the fact that you can charge machine guns in the air.
Yeah,
which you can't do in the game.
Yeah, I don't understand the whole, like, when a machine gun jams, you'll see switches, and even like in the Zero, the fucking machine gun is sitting.
A lot of airplanes, yeah, the machine guns are purposely put in the cockpit so that you can recharge them and so that you can unjam them.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's if a cannon jams, I assume those things are probably, I don't know, I've never shot 20mm, but I assume electric charge isn't going to clear that all the time, but it should at least have a chance factor.
Yeah, talk about the 30mm any?
Yeah, the 30mm is one of the most sparkly, beautiful guns. Essentially, it feels like you're shooting a Roman candle at people. And the custom battles, it was registering 90% of the time devastating results. You take the 30mm into a server, and for me, it works about 70% of the time.
I was under the impression that the Mark 108 30mm cannon for the Germans was the worst cannon in the game. I absolutely hated it, and I would empty whole belts into bombers and not get a kill, into the wing root, not even just firing at the fuselage, but I went into the custom server with Bohica, and I shot down G8N1 consistently with about 2 to 3 rounds. To give you an idea of how powerful the gun actually is, it's just all lag, it's all hit registration problems.
Yeah, I thought this was a damage model thing. I thought the G81 was like a super tanker, like it was this, couldn't be brought down. And then you go into custom battles with a good ping, and you're like, holy shit, this thing is actually kind of paper thin. It's all shit network. Like I said, I did not think I would be talking about networking in this podcast. I thought I'd be talking about how they could fix damage models, but networking is crap. So the main thing I think Gaijin needs to look at for flight model, or for damage models, sorry, that was last week, flight models, is they need to find the balance between realistic damage models and believable damage models. Because I'm not asking for 100% realistic damage models. I just want to, when I get shot down, or when I see an aircraft explode in front of me, I want to believe it's possible.
I think that's the biggest problem. I think they focus too much on making it feel movie-like and Hollywood-esque, cinematic with the explosions and big fireballs.
I think we can all agree that it's a very, very, very pretty game, but when you take the makeup off, it's still a rat underneath.
All right, I have one thing to say about that real quick. Yeah, it is a very beautiful game in a lot of ways. I have a problem with some of the damage models visually because I don't understand the confetti that flies off of aircraft when you're shooting at it or parts are blowing off of, because I've never seen aluminum break into paper like this before. Like, it's very strange how, you know what I'm talking about. You see that really ugly pixelated like confetti shit fly off of
And then you
aircraft.
fly through it and nothing happens to your airplane.
It looks like crap. It should just be taken out of the game until they find a better way to put debris in. The second thing is I have a problem with is the cockpit damage models. I hate how it looks like somebody took a Service 45 and just started shooting their cockpit. If you have 16 holes in your dashboard, it means somebody probably shot through your your chest cavity to put those bullet holes there. That's, I don't understand. Whoever put that at Gaijin headquarters put that visual damage model to the game. That kind of takes me off. But I like to see a little bit, like, there's some ugly visual effects that are still in the game.
Yeah, I think that's what you were talking about earlier, like the one-piece damage models. Like, you shoot the wing in a certain spot, you won't see bullet holes in that certain spot. You'll just see a pre-rendered artist rendition of a bunch of bullet holes randomly placed over the wings.
You'll get hit by 130mm, which should put a gaping hole in your left wing if it didn't fall off. But instead, you'll see about 80 50 cal holes. And now all it is a visual it's like, oh, wing damage this much, pre-built damage model. And whoever did the damage models actually did a fairly decent job. I won't, bash them. It's just, that's, and I guess it's part of the game engine, and there's a whole discussion on that. But the confetti crap, I don't know. It's whatever. Visual damage models are kind of on the back burner to actual hit registration damage models.
They show all this work that they're doing with the tank damage models, and I just wish they would pay the same level of detail to attention of the aircraft damage models.
Yeah, and I'll put the image in there too, if I haven't already, in the video of the tank damage models to give people an idea of how Gaijin does their damage models for their games. Alright, so basically the conclusion of my notes is I came up with an idea for Gaijin, but they'll probably never want to hear it from me. Is I would take their best modelers, designers, flight model engineers, whoever is their real talent there, build one airplane from the ground up with a perfect, visual model, a good cockpit model, a good damage model, a good visual damage model, everything perfect, and then show it to the rest of the team and say, if it doesn't look like this, act like this, fly like this, in all regards, don't fucking submit it to the game. Because this whole inconsistent quality shit is killing this game.
I think it's just frustrating a lot of people. The lack of consistency is killing the game, because it's just pissing people off. I mean, it's just frustrating.
There's a lot of, and the thing is,
out new shit and fix what's already out.
The thing with airplanes, though, and you're an aircraft guy, is that a lot of people have emotional attachments to certain airplanes. And they love airplanes, they study this airplane, they love watching movies with this airplane, they watch documentaries with this airplanes, whatnot. Most people are playing War Thunder have like World War II for one reason or another. I would agree. You wouldn't be playing this game if you didn't like World War II airplanes, let's face it. And so when you get a plane in the game that you love, like some Japanese players love the Ki-84 that was recently put into the game. Complete shit in absolute every regard, right? And it's just, you just crush a certain part of your population that was waiting on that plane. They probably could have waited for it for another 1 or 2 or 3 patches, but instead they have an empty shell of what they wanted that they have to look at every time they log in.
Yeah.
So I'll stop ranting on that. But
I'm really looking forward to 3 airplanes: the Hawker Sea Fury, Cherry Firefly, and the Lockheed Hudson / PB-1 Ventura / PB-2 Harpoon that hopefully will be coming in the game. And I hope to hell that it's worthwhile, because I'm going to be very, very, very pissed off if it's not.
I really want the P-61 in the game, but I don't want it if it's going to underperform, or if it's going to, have a shit damage model. Or like if they put a P-61 Black Widow in the game, I want to be able to use it. unlike the K-84. What other planes? A8s. The F-198's a piece of shit that nobody's
Hellcat's
using.
a piece of crap. Now, granted, it's gotten better since the last time they fixed it, but it's still
Except it flies
worthless.
like a paper plane.
Yeah, it's still worthless. It's just not.
So
it's so frustrating because I know what these airplanes are capable of doing in real life, but in the game, it's just ugh.
If you want to hear all the terrible flight models of War Thunder, just please refer to the last podcast that Mohica uploaded.
I really did not want to get into a rant mode this week in this podcast. I honestly thought, this was something that we could review. We could say, hey, this plane, P400 needs help, the P38 needs help, but as a whole, damage models were okay. And by Thursday morning, I was disgusted and wanted to vomit with what I was finding.
This is the exception rather than the rule of having a good damage model. Exceptional whenever it does have a decent one.
Yeah. And so I'll wrap up with that. Next week, we're going to have what's actually it's going to be what you and I course, as it looks like right now. Talking about your aerial combat maneuvers series you're about to release.
As soon as I get to do the commentary.
Someday, if you ever find the time.
All the videos made.
But a lot of you have been asking, at least us in the game and chat and a little bit in comments, for especially all the newer players that start playing the game want help with, well, the head-on is the best maneuver in War Thunder if anybody wants to know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to learn some other tools, we'll be here next week. If you have any scenarios or positions you want to, that you find yourselves in that you would like us to address in next week podcast, go ahead and leave those. And like I said, thank you for
in the comment section.
Thanks for joining us this week, Cobey. I know this is something that you wanted to address, and I'm glad you were at least here to be able to do this.
Happy to help anytime. If anyone has any questions, answer them on the bottom, and he'll get back to me, and I'll be happy to answer them for you.
Thanks for everybody who listened, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.